On today's episode of LTV, I'm going to be talking about the surprising lessons that I've learned scaling a sales organization. Over the last couple of years, as Proposify has moved up market and has started to serve the mid-market, we've had to build a sales engine. We've had to build a sales team and processes in order to do that. And I always have kind of felt a little bit insecure about my knowledge of sales. I started my career more as a product person, as a UX designer. I ran an agency, but I never really felt like I knew sales enough to hire and build a scalable team and scalable processes. So over the last 6 months or so, I've had a huge amount of revelations and painful lessons that I've learned that I want to share with you today. So these are the 7 things that I've learned about sales as we scale towards 10 million. I always kind of thought it was going to be much easier than it is. I thought that, okay, we have this self-serve engine, we have small customers who sign on and use the product. Great, let's keep them, but let's also layer on top of that a sales-driven kind of enterprise tier of bigger companies. And that's just going to be kind of like layering that on top of, much like layering icing on an already well-built cake. Well, as it turned out, it's actually a lot more like taking an existing cake and trying to like turn it into muffins without anyone noticing. Like a lot of aspects of the business had to change. It wasn't just sales. It was what messages are we talking about on the website and in our advertising and all across our marketing copy. Is the pain that we're talking about really resonating with this particular mid-market or enterprise? Same thing, the product had to undergo a lot of changes. The features that we built and the way we built things were really for smaller customers, and we had to figure out what does the mid-market really need and what features are going to add value to their lives. So it's been a complete overhaul of the business. And trying to do that while the company is also growing and while smaller customers are signing on has been a massive undertaking. So big lesson there is that if you're going to pivot and you're going to change markets, whether that's going up market or even down market, there's some companies that start out enterprise and want to move to smaller market. It's a lot like kind of ripping the engine out of a car while the car is still moving. So beware before you make this. Doesn't mean it's a bad choice to change markets or to pivot, but it's probably going to be a lot harder and take a lot longer than you think. You have to hire the right sales leader for where you're at currently in your business. A lot of startups make this mistake. It's kind of like out of the VC handbook whenever you raise money, is that they always say you need to go out and find a VP of sales who has big experience, big company experience at a bigger SaaS company to come and show you basically how to build this from scratch. And what they'll also usually end up saying about 6 months later is like, every SaaS company that does this ends up firing that VP of sales. Sometimes they go through 2 or 3 of them before they find the right person. And it's so true. Like the person who's going to help you go from essentially 0 to like your first million in high touch sales is probably not the person who's like VP of sales at Shopify or some kind of larger SaaS company. Is probably going to be somebody who's a little bit more of a startup person who has worked with early stage startups, who knows how to go from building that team of essentially nothing into something. And so in the last 6 months or so, I've been working really closely with our director of sales, Daniel Hebert, and he has never been a VP of sales at giant SaaS company X, but he has worked with smaller SaaS companies and worked with teams that started with 1 sales rep and built them into a repeatable engine that you can scale. Sometimes that's the person you need because they're going to be a lot more on the ground level. They're going to be listening to sales reps' calls. They're going to be coaching them. They're going to be working on how can they improve what's here and get it optimized and kind of ship very quickly and make it to something that can scale later on. They're not going to try to attack everything at once. So you have to find the right person who knows how to do that and is very tactical. along those same lines, you can't specialize sales roles too quickly in a company. So this again is very like classic startup-y advice, is to specialize sales roles. So don't have a sales rep run the full sales cycle from outbound prospecting to nurturing to qualifying and then demoing and closing. You want to specialize those roles so somebody can just get really good at one thing and then move them through the sales process. This is like classic, predictable revenue kind of model. And in actual practice, it doesn't work amazingly well when you're brand new starting out and trying to build something from nothing. It's kind of like if with an early stage startup, you're not going to go out and raise money and then hire 100 engineers. That's going to slow you down. You're probably going to want to start with just a couple of engineers, maybe you and your co-founder, and figure out what market you're trying to serve, what problem you're trying to solve, and hit some level of product market fit before you try to scale. Well, it's exactly the same way if you're trying to build a sales engine. What you want is a sales rep who can try to experiment with outbound prospecting, do some cold calling, some cold email, figure out the nurturing and sort of the discovery process to demoing to closing, the whole full sales cycle. Because if they start getting good at that and you figure that with a couple of reps, they can make outbound prospecting work, that's when you want to go and bring in a BDR and maybe build a whole BDR team to run that. If you do that too quickly, you might find that you have a big team and they're just not getting any results. Sometimes you have to slow down in order to speed up. This is kind of just good advice in general, but especially when you're ambitious and you've got targets to hit, you want to kind of go. You want every dollar invested in scaling and driving revenue. And what you forget sometimes is to step back and work smart and work strategically. And this plays out in a whole pile of different ways. So one way is like, we ended up getting Colin on our team and growing him into a sales operations manager. And you might say, like, a small sales team, do they really need a sales ops manager? Wouldn't that budget be better invested in just another sales rep? But when you look at, okay, how much time is it taking to essentially have our sales leader, who should be working on the system and coaching, fumbling around trying to generate reports, trying to create funnels in Salesforce, and generally just trying to clean up the data and make it something that's efficient and predictable. That takes a lot of time. It's better to have a sales ops person doing that and assisting your sales director or your VP of sales. The other way is in working your deals. So we always want shorter deal cycles. We want to close quicker. But we had this occasion just recently where a lead came in, a prospect, and they wanted to buy. They were basically like, shut up and take my money. And they rushed the sales process. So they went from like a stage 0 opportunity in Salesforce to a close 1 within like a couple of weeks or a week. And we let them do it, which you'd think was great. We were certainly happy to get their revenue, but then we hear from customer success about 2 or 3 weeks later, yeah, they're gonna churn, they wanna cancel and get a refund because what they actually wanted out of the software, we don't do yet. And so we didn't take the time to kind of slow down and make sure we were bringing on right fit customers because we were too eager and ambitious to close the deal. Marketing and sales really need to be on the same team. This sounds kind of obvious, but what plays out in a lot of companies, and it was playing out in our company, is that they were completely siloed. There was very little collaboration happening between them. Marketing was creating content, blog posts and social media, and it was kind of getting ignored by the sales reps. They didn't have a lot of faith that the content was good or that it was useful, or they wouldn't even really use it in their prospecting. They were taking to LinkedIn and creating their own videos without really talking to marketing and seeing maybe marketing can help them polish up their content, present it better. They were just completely on separate teams. Here's what we did to fix it. So for starters, we just moved them onto the same floor, which isn't the silver bullet, but it gets some talking, it gets some collaborating. Marketing is now listening to sales reps' calls, hearing what the prospects are saying on the phone, getting to understand their pain a little deeper, hearing how they talk, how they describe things. This difference in language and how the perfect customer, the ideal customer profile talks, it's so important for your marketing team to know that. The other thing is, what do you actually score your marketers on? because marketing tends to look at higher metrics that are higher up in the funnel, like site visits, time on page, maybe social media engagement, MQLs, of course, leads. If you don't have them looking and being scored on numbers that are further down the sales funnel, like how much pipeline are they generating for sales, how many sales accepted leads, not just MQLs, but how many leads actually get through and get qualified, those numbers matter a lot more. And so getting them to measure the right things, to talk to each other, they've had off-sites together where they're sharing notes, they're starting to just engage and interact a lot more. And that has shown some really positive results. We've had our SDR Laura, who's hit her quota in terms of how much pipeline she's brought in. That comes from marketing. We've had a lot of success with our AEs prospecting the leads that come in through content. And so everything's starting to click now, and it's because we made them actually work together as one team. Cold calling isn't dead. This is something that you hear all the time. If you've ever been to the inbound event, people don't like to be disrupted. They don't like to be interrupted. And inbound is completely the way to go. But what's happened, which is kind of ironic in a way, is that inbound content marketing has gotten so competitive and there's so much content out there that it's actually harder to stand out amongst the noise. And it's kind of a combination that works really well now. Less people are doing cold calling, so therefore less people are getting cold called, and that channel is less saturated. So we've actually found this where our sales reps are getting way better at cold calling than they are even cold emailing. They're getting more success getting people on the phone. If that person has interacted with our content, it's easier to start a conversation. So don't discount an outbound channel just because it isn't the popular way to do things. You have to treat every buyer unique within an organization. This is especially true when you start to move up market and target bigger companies, is that a company is not a persona, right? Like people say, oh, we serve small businesses or we serve landscaping businesses. That isn't a persona because that isn't a person, it's a company. When you start to sell bigger deals, you'll often find they're multi-threaded and there's more decision makers. Sometimes you can talk to those people, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to give them materials, but you don't actually get to be on the phone with them. Other times there's multiple departments who are involved in making a decision. So it's really important that you carve out all these buyers and people who influence the buyers. You understand their jobs to be done. What do they do? What's their actual job responsibility? And what keeps them up at night? What's the rock that's in their shoe that you can help solve? What you'll sometimes and often find is that your product can serve a completely different problem between a marketing leader and a sales leader. The things that they care about, your problem can solve in a different way. And so you have to understand their needs and you have to create messaging and positioning around those problems so that you can get multiple stakeholders to buy in and move them through a sales process. So these are the lessons that I have learned that stood out to me. Make sure that you subscribe to the Proposify channel and share this around so other people can benefit. And I hope to see you again soon.